let me see real quick. I took 2 notes. Oh, Derek mentioned something about testosterone levels, even if it's TRT, are still, some people respond to TRT level. He said some people respond to TRT levels as if they're super physiological or respond better to them. But what he was talking about here was a little bit mixed. So he said levels, but the TRT level, I think what he's talking about, the TRT level is not circadian, it's flat throughout the day on long ester drugs, and so on long ester testosterones. So because it's somewhat flat, you end up with high levels at night that may compensate anabolically for not having higher levels in the morning and may give you a net benefit in muscular size or whatever. That may be true. It may be the opposite, that the lower part sensitizes you to the first part. It may be both going on. So the lower levels are so significant that they impact the overall reduction in sensitivity. It could be that. But I wanted to mention, just pharmacologically, so it's informative, a couple of more ways that this has effects. So if you're talking about the level on blood tests being optimized for natural levels, then the issue becomes, what does this testosterone do in the body? The problem is you have the same key, but you have a different lock. You have really different lock, a really detailed lock. And this key opens your lock, but not quite. It opens it, but not, it's as if the door doesn't open fully. So what it is your androgen receptor, at the very least, has, if I recall, over 90 polymorphisms. There's over 70. I sometimes forget numbers in long periods of time. But there's so many polymorphisms that we're all mostly a little bit different, literally. And not only are we a little bit different, but some people are majorly different. They respond at the androgen receptor to either DHT or testosterone very well. But probably, by the way, if you respond to both, there's another element, by the way. You might be thinking, I respond to DHT very well, I'm going bald. Yeah, not so definite. You may respond to the androgen receptor very well from DHT, but you may have a bunch of other things that affect your hair loss, making you basically less vulnerable to DHT response elements, or even lower DHT response elements. Some people with low levels of DHT and androgen receptor polymorphisms that are insensitive with hair loss. So it's not, so the end result, the phenotype, you could also have muscle phenotypes that make you gain muscle more than the androgen receptor. You see what I mean? So those are not so clear, but the androgen receptor, as an example, the main target of testosterone, has so many polymorphisms that the responses are different. So if somebody has a level of 600, he may have a lower phenotypic effect, not just to other receptors, but just due to the androgen receptor. Then someone else may have a very high one. And so the levels, the main problem that doctors do currently, like endocrinologists or sometimes urologists do this, HRT clinic guys, or the ones that they care genuinely about the HRT, is they don't consider the androgen effect. So when you consider androgenicness in chickens in the old steroid studies, you measure what? A body part. You don't measure the level of testosterone in the chicken or you don't, because you're using, this is not true. So it's because you're using other androgenic things. You could measure the level, but you should measure the level of testosterone for that androgenic thing. And you can still, in men, and so here you can't use it to guide. It would be very complicated. You have to measure a lot of things in the body outwardly to try to get an estimate of the overall androgen impact by side effects, basically, the muscle, other things that downstream, lipids, downstream. They don't do that. They just think this is the average level, so the average level should give you the average effect. But there's a lot of different effects from the average level. So that's why some people feel it less. Like, for example, actually, it's good we mentioned this here. This will be a long video, but someone, I don't know how to say your name. Maybe it's DJ Urzi. DJ Urzi or DeJersey doesn't find TRT life-changing. I wanted to mention, he took TRT at a significant dose and didn't see it as life-changing. Could be because he had higher testosterone levels initially. Could be something else people are not thinking about. When you inject TRT, you produce less gonadally, so you synthesize less to DHT and less to estrogen. Less to estrogen also. Estrogen is particularly synthesized around the testicles. There's a lot of aromatase there. There's also a lot of DHT in skin. So if you take the transdermal one, you synthesize more to DHT. But that's not all. You get all the sexual benefits more if the androgen is local to the penis and to the penis man. So they put it in the gonads because it's produced there naturally, but it has direct effects on the penis as well. So when you take HCG or HMG or recombinant FSH, which the best brand is folotropin alpha in comparison studies, and that's what I used to use. Can't find it in Thailand, unfortunately, but it's way more powerful than what you use for HMG. Way indiscernible. And HMG that you use is way more powerful than the HCG, which is because the HCG is blocked. I can tell you that for sure. It's underdose. But you can notice these things. But anyway, these things are produced locally. So that's different also than the injections, right? Maybe the injections have more of a net effect on muscle because a larger proportion of testosterone, less DHT and estrogen, maybe, or maybe because it's circulated to the muscle more because it's injected in that area. Remember that HCG has a shorter half-life and it's sort of immediate. We consider it immediate. So those are some things: the location of where it's produced, androgen receptor polymorphisms, and then one last thing to mention is what's called pharmacokinetics. There are also genetic polymorphisms in the mutations in CYP enzymes and other metabolic enzymes that cause slower metabolic rates or faster metabolic rates. Slower metabolic rates mean a lower dose of testosterone will have a greater effect on you, but your liver will be probably more damaged for it. And faster metabolic rates, like what I have, may protect the liver from high doses, but you need higher doses to get similar effects because it's just going through it faster. Basically, your liver is getting. It's also, you can consider it. I think it must depend on the dose also because there's a much higher potential to damage the liver with fast metabolism because those people that don't react to drugs, but not because of their brain, they don't react to any drugs, or you probably met some women that react very slowly to various drugs or like very sensitive to various drugs. That could be something in their brains, but it's oftentimes also a liver thing. So there are all these things to consider. Now, the liver thing will impact the actual levels. So you'll inject someone with a lot, but he'll show to have lower levels. The androgen receptor polymorphisms and other polymorphisms, but mainly androgen receptor for testosterone, will have effects on the other effects, like especially the stimulation, mental effects, and resilience effects. Now, also this person, DJ, or I hope I'm saying his name right, also mentioned that he may have had anxiety or circadian rhythm issues. Now, if you took TRT and you ended up flattening out your circadian rhythm to the point where you are naturally more sensitive to sympathetic nervous activity or have more, and you end up too tense to sleep well and stuff like that, this will dramatically influence everything. Like sleep apnea, for example, for many bodybuilders just stops their gains and it's significantly harming them. But it also could be that you had higher levels naturally, you didn't really replace them, or you just barely, and in which case he said he has sex drive improvements, which doesn't make sense for that. But you should have sex drive weakening if it was the same levels. That's what, even if it was slightly higher, it should weaken. So really, if it doesn't weaken, you have higher testosterone levels. But testosterone has different response elements. One of them is on the penis. The response element for the androgen receptor on the top part, the corpus cavernosum, is endothelial nitric oxide synthase activity, which dilates blood vessels locally in the penis. Sort of an irreplaceable function Cialis doesn't do exactly. And this is the changes. You might have an ENOS response element. You know what I mean? Not him, but some people. So there's IGF-1 response, there's a lot. So all of them differ, and the real guide is if you're doing it for how you feel, it's how you feel. If you're doing it for health, the only two reasons to do it for health are to avoid metabolic resistance or improve your sensitivity to insulin or deal with diabetes, which would be at a TRT kind of dose, not much higher, otherwise it does the opposite, and to avoid extremely low doses. If you're literally producing almost zero testosterone, your body develops an inflammatory signaling cascade that is actually harmful. But you would need to produce almost near zero, and keep in mind, this inflammatory cascade may not cause a shortening of life in the long term, because, for example, eunuchs live longer than men and women. So it's not just the effect of estrogen for sure. It must be some lack of sex steroids. So that's still being worked out. The scientists don't really know how sex steroids affect cellular aging.
So one of the benefits of TRT is maintaining steady levels, and the circadian rhythm is one thing, but when you go out and drink alcohol or you party or you miss a night's sleep, then testosterone levels crash. And so avoiding those crashes is anabolic and anti-catabolic,
I think
right?
he mentions it.
So in the Liver King's case, what I would ask Liver King is, if you live the ancestral life, everything you're pretty much doing is to optimize testosterone. The diet, the lifestyle, the sunlight, these are the things you would do to optimize natural testosterone production. Why, if he's living the life and doing all these things, does he not have optimal natural testosterone production that he would need TRT to bring him up to normal? Now later, he starts traveling around and he's
that's very
not
funny
living the
because
ancestral lifestyle. And of course, then it's going to challenge his testosterone levels, and then adding in TRT will keep him.
Oh, well, you found an excuse for him at the end of it. But he does say, and this is one of my things that always used to annoy me. I've watched like 3-4 podcasts, but the first one I noticed this. He says, which is true, testosterone levels have declined by about 50%. But then sometimes he says, so if you double testosterone levels So if you live these ancestral tenets, you can double your testosterone levels and return to the former ones. True. But sometimes he says you can increase them by 50%, so they return back to the old ancestral way. And I'm like, what are you doing? You have a fundamental problem with mathematics. You can't multiply and divide. And this is like so fundamental that you make the mistake sometimes, but not always. Which means sometimes you memorize it because you can't think through it. And then, so I was like, what is going on here? You should not be giving anyone advice to avoid Liver King sometimes says, I don't know if I mentioned this, he sometimes says like, who cares about what's in the liver? It's like, well, there's a thing that causes serious pathologies in the liver called vitamin A that your body, unlike plant vitamin A, cannot regulate into retinol. So we care, and zinc is also toxic, and maybe you can raise the toxicity level a bit, but not that much. Same with vitamin C. And then you have iron that's toxic, and then you actually want the good things in the liver, including choline, which is not toxic at high amounts, and he probably doesn't know that. And zinc, which is toxic at high amounts, and some vitamin A if you're not taking a lot already. So you need to know what's in the liver. How has ever the optimal way of living is not measuring it?